Hi, this is Ray from Trys10Studios. This is a game studio created to build both accessible and traditional games. This all started with my son Tristan. When he was a baby, he had this startle reflex that it was really cute. He looked like a roly-poly, and he would kind of curl up, and we didn't know at the time that startle reflex was because of him having cerebral palsy, but we always thought it was cute, so we started calling him Bug because of it. So if you look at the logo, it says Trys10Studios with this little ball here. That is a roly-poly. So if you were to read this is just a play on my son's name. It's Trys10Studios, right? And if you know anything about competitive gaming, tryhards, like, to 10, like all the way up. So it's kind of a play on all that. Trys10 Bug Studios. The bug is implied. I usually just say Trys10Studios. That's my email and all that stuff. So Tristan had cerebral palsy and epilepsy, and as his dad, I wanted him to experience the games that we did. The joy of playing games, exploration, and all that stuff. There weren't a lot of options for him. We had the Wii. The Wii was great with a lot of the Nintendo licensed games, specifically like Wii Sports Resort or Wii Sports itself, or a game he loved called Game Party. But anything like shooting games and stuff, they were very difficult. He wasn't able to play by himself. But with hand-over-hand assistance just means that if we're playing, he sits in my lap, or he used to sit in my lap, and I would grab the Wii controller in his hand and kind of help him gesture the movements and stuff. You could see him kind of want to flex his arms so that, like when we were bowling, I would wait for him to go like this, and I would help him bowl. Or if we were flying the plane or something like that, that I could feel where he wanted to either dive down or try to go up, or just keep asking him. Basically, I play 21 questions and make sure that he was having a good time. So anyway, there weren't a lot of games at the time, so I decided to create Trys10Studios with him in mind. And I had always wanted to make games. I had thought about going to Digipen when I was a kid. When I say kid, I was a teenager, and I was nervous about going across the country without any family or friends or anything. And then I considered Full Sail, but for the same reason. Full Sail suggests that you get an internship in California somewhere, and I was 18. It was about 3 years before that we had just moved back to Florida. I didn't really want to relocate across the country. And so, anyway, life kind of happens, and then I decided to, eventually Tristan came along, and then in 2013, when he was about 6 years old, I decided to look into Unity and start making games myself. And that just kind of kickstarted everything. So at first the games were just for him. They were for fun. They were just so he could have something to play on his own. I wanted him to have the independent experience. I loved playing with him, but I wanted him to feel like what it felt like to play Zelda or something by yourself. After that, later on, in about 2016, I had an interview with a company called Tobii, who does, if you know anything about Tobii Dynavox or the Tobii eye tracker controllers that they use for, their intention was to make immersion. They were trying to get into the video game market to be more immersive. And they did do a few things with, I believe, Assassin's Creed Unity, a few other ones, and some smaller independent game companies did so as well. I got the chance to use it as an inexpensive way to get into eye tracker controllers. So what I did was I decided to make a game for him and use that controller to my advantage. And so I made what I believe is the only game for that tracker controller that allows you to play with just your eyes. So you move your character around the world by 4 arrows on screen. The game's called Eyeball, by the way. You move up, down, left, and right, and then you navigate through mazes, and you try to avoid obstacles and stuff. So a very basic game, but it was my first real entry into making a game, specifically accessible as well as really fully polished, finished game. Eventually I went back to school and I earned my computer science degree because I figured that was more generalized and better than just a game degree. And hoping to turn that into a full-time career. And I still am. I'm still working on that. That's the YouTube channel, and I'm trying to make this grow and launch on Steam. I have some games on itch.io. I have some games and apps on the Android store. Currently, there's only one app on the store because I've had some issues with their new privacy updates on Android. So if you look up Trys10Studios, there's only one app on my store currently. There were 3 or 4. So yeah, when I went back to get my computer science degree, the very day that I was done with classes, that morning my son passed away. So it put a damper on some things, and it took me a few weeks to get back into the swing of things. As they say, it doesn't go away, but it gets a little easier. So today, alongside of making accessible games, I wanted to learn how to make traditional games so that I could bring that into the the domain of accessible gaming. Like, I wanted to learn how to make a traditional racer and then make that accessible. I did do that. I made a traditional tic-tac-toe game and made it accessible as well through eye tracking on the tic-tac-toe game. And for the racing game, I did it through very limited controls. Basically, if the player bounces into a wall, it straightens you back out, takes the transform of the object that you're bouncing into, and it sends you straight in that direction. I was thinking of different ways to do it. Thought it was pretty clever. So I also had considered making a controller, and I've seen some people doing some, low resistance based controllers, like little, one guy made a prototype Xbox controller for a kid who has muscular dystrophy, who over time his muscles get weaker and he's going to lose some of his strength. So making it so he can still play games, but he doesn't need as much pressure to push the buttons down. There are buttons that are used for communication. There's huge circular buttons that, if your hand is fisted, if you're clenched fist, you can very easily push the button, or you can use your head or whatever you're capable of doing, your legs, whatever. That way you can make decisions, or you can communicate your needs. And in the same way, if you're good with those buttons, you can play games and you can communicate through chat and stuff like that. So that was an idea. I basically thought of a 4-button controller, and then I started to prototype it. And about the time that I started prototyping it, Logitech came out with their affordable version, because Xbox had that base controller for accessibility. It was really expensive. But Logitech, and those buttons, by the way, by themselves, they can be very pricey, like $100 a button. And so Logitech made it so that the entire controller set that covers all of the Xbox buttons was like $200. And there's no competing with that, honestly. And I loved that they created that. I just wanted it to be out there. Again, for me, it was about making games that kids could really enjoy and, include everybody, basically. I still create accessible games here and again. I try to make accessibility in the games where I can, and also try to make a traditional experience. I try to make it so everybody can be involved and not be just accessible and, not really interesting to somebody who plays traditional games. Because, from a business standpoint, that's kind of not good. And then so you kind of want to be inclusive of everyone. But there are a lot of games that just completely ignore accessibility needs. And I'm not just talking about, if you're colorblind, but I'm talking about, what if a person gets stuck in this corner? You don't think, like, if you're racing in, say, Mario Kart, and you get jammed in a corner, someone like my son would not be able to pick his hand up and move the control stick left or right. He would just get stuck in that corner, and, without hand-over-hand assistance, in other words, without me helping him, he's not going to be able to go forward. And again, I wanted him to have that sense of independence. So, like, if he gets stuck in a corner somewhere, he can have track correction features, like bouncing into a wall and straightening you out, or, auto aiming and stuff like that for FPSs and stuff. So if you like any of this stuff, if you like video games, if you like traditional games, accessibility games, unique games, heartfelt stories, this is Trys10 Studios. Every game I make carries a piece of my bug with it.